Welcome in, everyone, to a brand new episode of the Real Estate Tax Playbook, where we discuss all things real estate, providing timely and precise tax information to real estate professionals look to build their own customized tax planning playbook. As always, I'm your host, Evan Ross, based out of our Roanoke, Virginia location with Brown Edwards and Company. By now, in our second season, you've probably had a chance to check out Brown Edwards and Company. If you have not, please go check out our website at your convenience. A link to that website can be found in the description of this podcast. On the website, you'll find more information on our other service lines, as well as service providers and our other locations throughout Virginia, West Virginia, and Tennessee. With that, we've got a good one for you today. I'd like to introduce to you our guest. We have Bill Chapman, based out of Richmond, Virginia, with Bill Chapman Inc. Bill, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yep, I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. Before we get into it, I'd love for you to just kind of give a brief background on you, what you do on a day-to-day within the real estate world.
Yeah, so I'm a real estate developer that's based out of Richmond. I've been doing work in Roanoke now for close to 20 years. The majority of my work is adaptive reuse, historic tax credit work. So we take, historic warehouses, office buildings, retail buildings, and convert them into mixed use, usually multifamily and some kind of small amount of commercial.
Very good. Well, I appreciate that. We got a good one for everyone. This is one of those more boots on the ground episode. Bill has the actual expertise. He's there. He's in it every day. He's not one of the technical experts that we typically bring on the pod. So I think this will be a breath of fresh air and good information for all of our listeners out there. So with that, we always get started with our episode with the segment, Tell Me More. So you and I, we met a week or two ago at the Quarters, one of your locations. We were talking about baseball, and it came up about one of your sons and the work that he's doing with Kind Performance with Dave Clay. So I'd love for you to kind of just speak more on that to listeners that may be interested in baseball or this technology.
Yeah, and it's just a microcosm of where youth sports has gone today. The level of technology and expertise that is available to kids who are as young as 12 years old continually blows the mind of an older guy like me who had, none of that. So my youngest son, Ben, who is 12, is working with this guy, Dave Clay, out of Richmond, who works with high school athletes and college athletes who are coming back for the summer. And the whole idea behind the program comes from this Swiss program that understands that athletes don't do things the same way. And so how can we take each individual athlete and allow their body to perform at its highest to be able to accomplish whatever it is they're trying to accomplish? So in Switzerland, they're using this technique for tennis and for track. And it's really just starting to get brought in for baseball now. And so the concept is, again, each of our bodies move differently. We each have different strengths and weaknesses. There's not one way to swing a baseball bat or to throw a baseball. And so you go through, or Ben went through, this hour and a half sort of process of learning what it is that your body does best and how it moves best. And then from there, Dave sort of creates this program that creates a swing profile and a throwing profile that allows you to do what you do best. So for Ben, it was, starting off of where's your best balance. Your best balance can be in one of four areas on your feet, either your right heel, right ball, or left ball. And so for Ben, after going through a series of tests, they learned that his best balance and his most strength is his right ball. So when he first started the program, really the only thing for hitting was just concentrate on firing off of that right heel and staying grounded on it. And then they go into much more, detailed things like, are you a terrestrial or an aerial based on how it is that you stand when you're in the box? Are you more of a person who swings down or does your body move better for a level swing? And so you go through this process of sort of learning, again, what it is that your body does best. And then there is a cage with a very advanced hitting machine or pitching machine and cameras everywhere that sort of break down what your body does. And I mean, within 10 minutes, his exit velocities jump by close to 10 miles an hour just by better scap load because he's more of a horizontal swinger and by firing off of that right heel. So, for an older guy like me to sort of see this stuff is really interesting. It's just such a different way of teaching kids today. And I love at least, sort of having a bird's eye perch of just watching how it all works.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Thanks for sharing. Even though I'm a little bit younger than you, I mean, even when I was growing up, it was hey, everybody, this is the mechanics you need to have, the way you need to swing. It was the same for everyone. They were just teaching one way of swinging or pitching or whatever it was, whatever aspect of the game. But it's great that now they're really customizing it to each athlete.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's so I was taught the same way. There's one way to swing a baseball bat. That's it. There's one way to throw a baseball. And the reality is all of our bodies are different. We all have strengths and weaknesses. And the idea of someone sort of tuning into that and fine tuning the way your body works makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I could have a chat all day, I think, about baseball in this conversation. But I'm sure that's not why everyone tuned in for the day. But if anyone is in the Richmond area and interested in Kime for Performance, that's KIME Performance, please go check out their website if you're looking for more information. I'll give them a little shout out today. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the conversation. So Bill, I mean, you mentioned you do a lot of historic rehab, a lot of mixed use properties. What was kind of your initial introduction to real estate? What got you going in the real estate industry?
I mean, the most non-traditional entry that you could imagine. This would have been back in the early 1990s. I just graduated from VCU with a journalism degree. I was working in sports radio for both the Richmond Times-Dispatch, for the University of Virginia Sports Network, and made no money whatsoever. And worked in restaurants, bartending to be able to supplement income. And worked at a place that was probably the most popular place in town with downtown's entrepreneurial elite. Got to know a ton of people. And at that time, downtown Richmond was just starting to see its first rehabilitations. I was living downtown in one of like maybe 2 or 3 rehabilitations that had been completed. I was living in an old warehouse, thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And so I was kind of on the ground level of sort of seeing it happen. And I got to know a lot of the guys that were involved in it very early on. As I got further down the road of my sports radio career, it just wasn't really what I wanted to do. And I had an opportunity to jump into project management with one of the guys I'd met, back in that time. And my timing was right. It was just when Richmond was starting to take off. I had a group of guys that were very aggressive, buying up everything they could possibly buy. And so I think within a 5-year period, I managed 18 projects. And so got just a ton of work. And, again, for me, it was before I was married. It was before I had kids. I could, jump into 80 hours a week of work and sort of learn by the seat of my pants. And that's how it came to fruition. Roanoke kind of came secondly. There was a group of us that was brought from Richmond to Roanoke to see just what was happening downtown. And I'd never been here before. I had no family here, no, family connections or anything like that. And just remember coming downtown and seeing that there was already this sort of critical mass of restaurants and entertainment, which is really important for multifamily and why people live downtown. And remember going down Salem Avenue for the first time, and it was this old warehouse area. And, our tour guide at the time said, man, this is where all the prostitutes hung out 20 years ago, all the drug dealers. This was the shadiest part of town. And from my time of living downtown in Richmond, living in a warehouse area where all the locals thought, oh, that's kind of a rough area. I don't know why anybody would want that. I had a chance to see out-of-town developers come in and buy up the best concentration of high-quality warehouses. And so when my tour guide here said, oh, this is a rough area, you probably don't want anything to do with this, and I saw the best concentration of high-quality warehouses, it was, that bell went off, and that's how it started.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to be my next question, just how you kind of gravitated towards the Roanoke market. Was it just kind of on a whim, you and the people you were working with, or did you get a tip from someone that this could be a good area, or how did that happen?
Granger McFarland is a guy was a state senator, has lived in Roanoke all of his life. His son is a developer who lives in Richmond. And so his son approached me and said, hey, my dad wants to put together a group of like 4 or 5 of us to go to Roanoke. And I remember thinking, I'm so busy, I don't know that I have time for this. And then I thought, you know what, I should go and at least take a look. It's just a day, go there, spend the night and take a look. And you never know how life's opportunities are going to come. But I remember seeing it, being really impressed with that area of Salem Avenue and thinking, I need to learn more about Roanoke over the next, few months to a year to see what kind of market is there. And as I became more interested in it, maybe 6-7 months later, 3 buildings became available. I was told they were going to hit the market the next day. I drove down that day, saw them, and put them all under contract before they hit the market. And that's how it got started.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, as a Roanoke native, I'm glad that you did take the leap of faith to come check out Roanoke, because a lot of the projects you've done really look incredible. It's helped revitalize the area that you were speaking about, especially on Salem Avenue. So, do you want to speak on some of the projects you've worked on? I'm sure our listeners, some may be familiar, others not. What are some of those projects that you have worked on or currently working on?
Yeah, so the majority of our projects have been in that Salem Campbell Avenue area in the western part of downtown that we've named the West Station District. That includes the Fulton Motor Lofts, which was a 22-unit condominium project. That was our first project in Roanoke. We finished that in 2008, and we're very fortunate in our timing. I mean, I think we sold all but 2 of the units prior to the crash in the fourth quarter or late third quarter.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. You said, I don't think I realized that Fulton Motor Lofts was 2008. So I was going to ask how that impacted you, if at all.
Again, timing is kind of everything. And part of that is skill and part of that is luck. Roanoke was a little late getting into the recession. It's a tertiary market. It is a little more insulated. It tends to see results of economic distress later, and it may take a little longer for it to get out on the back end. And that's just what kind of worked in our favor, was that as sort of the world was crumbling, we had, fortunately got our project done on time, and we were able to, we had very little competition to sell condos. There have been a couple of projects downtown that clearly showed demand and what kind of absorption rate there was. And, we hit our targets. So,
that's great.
Really lucky. So, that was 2008. 2009 was pretty much dead. There was no opportunity for lending. No lenders were doing anything whatsoever with real estate. So, I was flush with cash after selling, condominiums, and was able to kind of ride it out. And then in 2010, really the first thing that came back in the commercial real estate world was urban multifamily. That was the one segment that had really seen, no negative impacts from the 2008 crash. Demand was still very strong. And in Roanoke, there wasn't anywhere near the amount of product that was needed downtown. So Ed Walker had just finished his first project, the Hancock Building, which was 53 apartments. He had pre-leased all 53 apartments and set what apartment rates would be, which is really important for small cities to be able to, for appraisers to be able to look at these projects and sort of give a number on what they're worth. Someone has to do one of these first to actually show what they're worth. And so someone like an Ed, who has access to capital and sits on the board of a bank, had access to that, was able to really get the first one off. And so that sort of laid the groundwork for us to do our next project, the Lofts at West Station. It's the first phase of that project, which was 71 apartments, and Beamer's 25, which was the first restaurant really to open in the West Station area of downtown. And so that would have been in 2011 when we opened there. From there, we went to Parkway 301, which was our next project. The former Shenandoah building at First and Kirk. That's where the Blue Ridge Parkway was designed, on the 6th floor of that building, where it was managed for over 30 years. So a building that had a really rich history to it. And so that was an 89-unit project. On the ground floor, we had Luna Innovations, which is one of the bigger companies here in Roanoke, and Fortunato, a Italian farm-to-table restaurant that was started by the guys who had Lucky, another really popular restaurant in Roanoke. From there, our next project was 416 Micro Farms, a small building back on Salem Avenue. Only 7 apartments, but we did a little taqueria there called Tuco's, which really sort of took that neighborhood and made it a very popular neighborhood. Who would have known that tacos would be so popular as what they were then? But there was a real interest in it. And I remember opening night, just a line down the block of people trying to get in. And so that kind of established our neighborhood as sort of the cutting edge, neighborhood for new concepts.
I will say, Tuco's, my wife loves that restaurant. So anytime we're down around Big Lick Brewery, which you may mention soon, but we always stop by Tuco's. So great place. And obviously that got renovated within the last year or so.
That's right. So they went through a renovation. It's hard to believe the concept's already almost 10 years old, but it's close to that.
Yeah, so, it doesn't seem that old. But
so he wanted to do a refresh of the interior space and just finish that. Shortly after completing that project, we jumped back across the street and did the second phase of the Lofts at West Station, which was another 71 apartments and Big Lick Brewing Company. And, I would say between Tuco's and Big Lick, that's really where the neighborhood started to take off. Big Lick was a great space that not only had an interior that was interesting, but the building that was there previously had a sort of metal shed that fronted Salem Avenue, and it wasn't historic. We knew we could take it down and create a 6,000 square foot beer garden out there. And so not only was it outdoor space, but it was situated right on Salem Avenue. So anytime someone drives by, they could see, a ton of people out there showing vibrancy and a real sense of being alive. And so, Big Lick was in a very small space up the street on Salem Avenue. This was a high school teacher who had started this in his spare time. And, I didn't know those guys. They weren't my first, I hate to say this, they weren't my first choice. I didn't really know anything about them. They were so small. And we had a group out of Salem that was very interested in the space and wanted it. And then their main brewer had some health issues that came about. So we had to pivot and started looking at a group out of Norfolk that really wanted the space. And then a group out of West Virginia that really wanted the space. And before I struck a deal with one of those guys, the owners over at Fortunato said, you really ought to go over and take a look at what Big Lick's doing. They're making the best beer in town, and we think it'd be worth your while. And so I took their advice, went over and introduced myself, sat down, tried their beer, thought they made a really good product. And I think by far it was the best outcome of having those guys go into the space. The microbrewery market is all about local. It's not about, another local brewery from another part of the state coming in and opening a satellite. It's about supporting your local guys. And so, sometimes things kind of just work out right. And that was one of those things that just worked out the best possible way it could.
Yeah, that's a great location. It's funny that you mentioned Big Lick and their old location. So I remember I'm in a fantasy football league with Brian, the main owner there at Big Lick. And our first fantasy football season, we did the draft at the small little brew pub they had a little bit closer to downtown on Salem Avenue. And it's just funny to see how far they've come. It's incredible. So now we do our fantasy drafts in the big room they have at Big Lick off to the side. So it's funny how things have changed over 5-10 years. But
yeah, he's just a great operator. He deeply cares about his product. I think he has a real eye for live music, an ear for live music. And, they've been able to take a concept that was in a teeny tiny little space into a space that's probably 5-6 times what it was previously and turn it into what has become Roanoke's, consistently year after year, best brewery is voted by the people of Roanoke. So just a great guy and a great concept. And we couldn't be happier.
Yep, I completely agree. So, and actually my previous episode, I was speaking with the economic development team with Roanoke City, Brady Lawrence, as well as Alicia Cundiff. But a lot of that, we're talking about everything that's happening in the Roanoke City area. You mentioned a lot of the restaurants that are in the spaces that you've been a part of. I did want to mention you threw out Beamer's 25. That obviously, unfortunately, just announced that they were closing last week. That was a surprise to me. I'm sure it was not a huge surprise. You probably knew something about that. But is there any plans for that space moving forward?
Well, I think first and foremost, Beamer's was truly the trailblazer of our neighborhood downtown. Yep. And so, they took a chance and took a risk when I don't think anyone else would have even considered going into that part of Salem Avenue. And so I give them all the credit in the world. It lasted for 15 years, which in restaurant life is an eternity. Restaurants are no different than, human lives. There's a beginning and there's an end. And it just felt like, after 15 years, the concept had kind of, run its course. And the operator there is also starting to slow down. He's older than I am and still has, I think, 20 concepts. And so it just felt like the right time to do it. I do have another group based out of Roanoke that is very interested in the space. I already have a letter of intent. So we're going through sort of the financing and the numbers of how something like this would work. And my hope is we'll be ready to make an announcement in the next month.
That's great. All right. Well, everyone, keep your ears out for a press release. I'm sure that'll hopefully be coming in the near future. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Moving right along. So every developer, I'm sure they have the ebbs and flows. Do you have any just horror stories, things that you can share that maybe other developers can look out for if they're early in their career? What can they do to avoid a catastrophic mistake if you have any of those scenarios?
I mean, I don't think you can do the number of projects I've been a part of and not have something really bad happen. There's so much risk in taking on these older buildings that eventually your number is going to get called. It's just the way it is. And so for me, there are really two projects that had some tough times. I would say Parkway 301, without a doubt, was probably the most stressful and challenging project that I've ever done. So this would go back to maybe, I think, March of 2013. And so this Shenandoah building, which is what it was called, was a 7-story building, originally built as a 3-story square building in 1915. And then about 10 years later, they added 4 floors as a U shape on top of the square to get more windows in. And they did that while they had offices working on the bottom 3 floors. They built the additional 4 floors on top while people were working.
Oh, wow.
And so because of that, because they wanted to go to a different shape on the upper floors, the column lines didn't add up. And it's clear they tried to make an adjustment to where they didn't have to disturb people inside of the building too much. And so they put in these giant transfer beams to allow a separate column line to exist so that the upper floors could basically hit that transfer beam. It would transfer weight over to the existing columns horizontally and then go down to the foundation. So, when we took this building on, we saw those giant transfer beams. Part of them were on the inside of the U, and then part of them were covered by roofing on the outside of the U. And because there was so much asbestos out there and people still working in the building when we took it on, we didn't want to go about disturbing the exterior because, again, we knew the environmental hazards that were out there. I should have done that. That's what should have happened. So we started on the building. We're doing demolition from the top floor, coming down. And we get down to the 3rd floor and they start taking the roof off of those beams on the outside part of that U. And they are completely shot, completely rusted out. And our engineer comes on site and looks at it and says, I have no idea how this building is even standing right now. We need to get everyone out of the building immediately. And we need to get in touch with the city and block off the entire block because this thing could come down at any minute. And so you get that phone call and, were you
in town at that time or were you?
No, I was in Roanoke. My contractor called me first. He said, hey, we've just taken the roof off of this. We see it and it looks awful. We need to get an engineer out here immediately. And our engineer did get out there immediately. And, an hour later, it was abandoned the site. And so we get in touch with the city. We block off the entire block. And at this point now, we've got to figure out what's the best solution to trying to get this fixed. And so our structural engineer puts together a plan where he's going to give us multiple options of how to fix it. We're going to get pricing on each one of those, and then we're going to make a decision based off of what's the best long-term approach and what's the most cost-efficient approach to doing this. And we also hired a second set of engineers to review the first set of engineers' work to make sure that it wasn't being over-designed or that maybe they had missed something. It's almost like getting a second opinion when you go to the doctor. And the one thing that was almost really unexpected was when you find out something like this happens on a typical size building of a couple of stories, you find a shoring company, and the shoring company comes in and stabilizes the building. Well, the weight and the size of this building were so great that a shoring company could not support a building of this size. We had to find a bridge shoring company to come in and shore this. And so they're not on every street corner. There was one in Washington, D.C., and there was one in the Triangle area of North Carolina. And so when there's so little competition, they kind of set their prices. And so you just start thinking, my gosh, this thing is just spiraling, out of control. But, to our credit, we were able to, come up with 3 options. We priced all 3. We, ended up choosing one and, lo and behold, we got it done. At the same time, at a week later after this discovery, and that process from start to end was probably a 4-month process.
Okay.
So about a week after discovering this problem and trying to get the bridge shoring company in, the historic tax credit market collapsed. And I should say the investment market collapsed for historic tax credits. There was a court case in New Jersey that that looked at a rehabilitation that the state of New Jersey did on a historic boardwalk. Their partner in it was Pitney Bowes. They were taking the tax credits. And, the market as a whole understood that for these projects to work, that the investor needed to come in early. It needed to have some level of risk. There needed to be something on the back end of the deal that provided some level of reward. And that's how these projects worked, because you're not allowed to buy and sell tax credits. You can bring in an investor who will take a distribution of those tax credits in exchange for contribution of equity to the project. And so what the state of New Jersey did was they brought in Pitney Bowes literally days before they pulled their certificate of occupancy. So no construction risk on the front end.
Yeah.
They exchanged tax credits, and then Pitney Bowes had no option whatsoever to gain over the next 5 years that it had to be in the deal for IRS standards. And so they
just got in and got out?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
No risk, no reward, just here's the tax credits, here's the cash, thank you very much. And the IRS blew the whistle. It went to court. The court said, yep, this was not a real partnership at all. This was a sale of tax credits, and that's illegal. And when that happened, the tax credit investment market said, well, we know that's not legal, but now we don't know up from down or right from wrong. What other things are out there that we need to be prepared for? So at this time, we're dropping all investments. And so our partner at the time was Sherwin-Williams Bank Company.
Mm-hmm.
They had just done a project with us at the Lofts at West Station, so we had a good relationship. They'd done projects that I was involved in Richmond also. And a week after finding out that we had this enormous structural problem at the building, Sherwin-Williams says, hey, we're out. We can't do this.
Oh, no.
And so, because most of that equity comes in on the back end of the deal after the project is complete and gets its tax credits, you have bridge loans that sort of bridge the gap before that equity comes into the deal, because the cost to do these projects exceeds what the finished value is. Those tax credits are important to making these things work. So we had already started filling up our bridge loan and all the work that we had done so far, and now we had no tax credit investor on the back end. So again, this happens within a week of the biggest structural issue that I've ever seen. There was not a lot of sleep in March of 2013.
I would think not, with all that going on.
And so the market dries up. There was a group out of West Virginia that had shown interest in doing our projects, a bank out of West Virginia that had come to me multiple times and said, we'd love to be, someone who financed one of your deals. We'd be your tax credit investor. Just find a way to get us in. So I called them. They are very interested. And I say, hey, guys, you may want to pay attention to this case that's happening, because it's given some of the investment world, some heartache over it, but you should understand this. And so sent them over all the information. They said, yeah, sure. We see that, but, you're a good developer. We feel like we can structure this. And so we get another couple of months down the road of doing all of our due diligence. We're a week away from closing, and they say, yeah, we can't do this. Now that we're learning more about this boardwalk case, our attorneys are telling us that it's just not a good thing to do right now.
Oh, man.
And so again, now I'm 2 months further down the road, still a tax credit investor involved in the deal. And at this point, the only guys that are out there that are doing deals are really small operations that are just the sharks of the world. They smell blood in the water. And so we ended up getting a deal done with this really small outfit out of Charlotte. They were a absolute nightmare to work with as partners. It caused so many problems, but we ended up getting the deal done, and we ended up finishing the project. And today it's you would never know all those terrible things happened. So the lesson of it all is you go through things like this in life that are incredibly challenging, that you don't think you can get through, that you think, oh my God, I'm going to be living in a cardboard box here in the next couple of months. And you get through it, and you become stronger. And, the next time that something much smaller happens, you're pretty well equipped to handle something like that.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. Do you think there would have, obviously you can't control what happens with the market and the historic tax credit market kind of crashing a little bit after that New Jersey case. Could you have done anything differently in your mind on the structural piece as far as like due diligence or anything? Or is that just one of those?
Yeah. So on the structural part, I should have gone in on a weekend when workers weren't there and explored below the roof line. Do some asbestos abatement when no one's in the building. Get guys out there on a Saturday or Sunday to do it. That would have been the smart thing to do. And so, what makes office buildings a little different than warehouses, which most of my work at that time had been with warehouses. Warehouses are much simpler to do historic tax credit projects with. And it's hard. You have to really try really hard to not be able to see a problem because most warehouses are wide open spaces. Mm-hmm. There's nothing hidden behind walls. They're generally not 7 stories. They're generally built at one time. So this project on its own was a much more complex project than I had done in the past. And so I was a little out of my league in terms of working with a building like this. And yeah, the lesson is, you just have to leave no stone unturned before starting the project. The tax credit part of this, there's nothing that, there's nothing I could have done to predict that, to prevent that. There are just some things in life that happen that are completely out of your control. And, I'd love to say there's a way I could have done that better. There really isn't.
Yeah, I think it's one of those snowball effects. It started with the structural piece and then moved on to the issue with the market. And then you had to deal with those quote unquote sharks, I guess, that small shop. But more, you got the job done. It's a great space now. So I guess it's all in the past, but a learning experience nonetheless.
Yeah. Great building, great bones, great to rehabilitate a building that has such historic meaning to the community. So yeah, no regrets there, and bigger and stronger because of it.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure that's helpful to some of our listeners out there. Do you have a favorite project that you've worked on?
I would say that. So the current project that I'm doing right now at 501 Salem Avenue, that is the former Sunlight Bakery building, locally known either as the Kroger building or the Marita building, which it was a slew of different bakeries throughout time. I don't know that I would say it's my favorite, but it is by far the most challenging of any project that I've taken on up front, only because the building has, it's been vacant for the last 30 years. Most of the buildings that I take on have been occupied, in the last at least 5 years. And so you take a building that hasn't been occupied for 30 years where the owners have just allowed it to, fall into disrepair, just a ton of roof issues, water issues, collapsed floors in different areas. The building also was over a period of time was changed in 3 different ways where they added on to certain areas. They had areas where there were wood floors where they chopped out the wood floors and wanted to put in a larger piece of baking equipment. So they built these, really thick concrete floors that don't match up with the wood floors in height or, in size. In order to support them, they put beams into former windows that are there. So just a slew of different conditions. And you would think, why in the world would you want to take on something like this?
And I'm thinking in my head, I was like, that just sounds miserable.
It is, but we're kind of at the stage in Roanoke where most of the best buildings have been taken at this point. If we want to keep developing that sort of neighborhood and growing the neighborhood of Salem Avenue in the West Station district of downtown, this is by far the biggest eyesore. It gives us an opportunity to expand over 5th Street, which sort of starts the next wave of development moving further west. People have asked us over the years, why has no one taken that building on? You look at it from the outside, it looks fine. You get to the inside, and you see it's a train wreck. It's really because there were better options, and now there really aren't better options. And we see more value in building up the neighborhood. And yes, maybe this will cost more, and it certainly will cost more to do this project. But we think overall it can continue to grow the neighborhood. That's better for all of our assets that are on Salem Avenue. So I don't know that I would call it my favorite project, but I would say that it's the most challenging one that I've done. And there's a side of me that's looking forward to really sort of taking, a dog of a building and making it something.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what the finished project looks like. Is there a timeline for that 501 Salem?
Yeah, so we've just started. We've just started doing interior demolition. We've gone through the historic tax credit process, so we've been given the okay from both the state and federal government. We're close to completing construction financing, probably in the next couple of weeks. So we've started doing some selective demolition, getting all the junk out of the building, shoring up some areas that need to be shored up to ensure that different parts don't collapse. And then my expectation is, this is every bit of a year project, so we should be bringing these online, call it end of summer next year.
Okay, yeah, that's very exciting and great for the expansion of that kind of West Station area across Fifth Street. So looking forward to what that looks like. Do you have any other current projects that are in the works at this point in time, or are you kind of all hands on deck for the 501 Salem project?
Yes, the 501 Salem is 33 apartments and a small amount of commercial space. That's taken the majority of my time and effort now. We own some property further west of this on Norfolk and on Salem Avenues. We looked at a affordable housing project on Norfolk Avenue and went through rezoning a little over a year ago. That project's currently on hold. A couple of challenges right now. One is in 2024 when government released rent numbers for markets around the country. Roanoke's rent numbers actually went down, which is a real rarity. It probably comes from sort of the uncertainty that occurred during the COVID era of 5 years ago, where rents really jumped, and the government was probably too aggressive in jumping rents higher and higher each of those years. So we believe this was a correction. It has come back to stabilize in 2025. But the investment market for affordable housing right now has become very challenging. And so that's something that will likely need to be solved in Congress. And so for the time being, that's on hold. That would have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 175 to 200 units.
Oh, wow.
We think, affordable housing is incredibly important, not just in Roanoke and elsewhere. The idea of just how hard it is to find something that, the average person can afford is become more and more challenging, both with buying a house and renting an apartment as well. So there's clearly a need for it. There's clearly a market for it. It's just a matter of how do we get this off the ground.
I completely agree. There's definitely a need for it. And you mentioned there's more and more apartments and multifamily housing going up because a lot of people, they just can't afford those single family homes this day and age. So we'll see what happens at the Congress level, and we'll move forward at some point in the future in that area, hopefully, with your project.
Yeah.
So,
hopefully so.
Yep. All right. Well, I appreciate it. I don't want to keep you too long. It's been a ton of good information today. I appreciate you sharing some insights, providing some guidance to some of our developers out there that maybe have less experience, or maybe they are experienced and they just want to hear from someone else on what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and just learn from you. So anything else, Bill, you want to share before we wrap up the episode today?
No, I mean, I've been doing historic rehabilitation now for, close to 25 years. It's incredibly rewarding work. You never get used to the before and the after. Even after doing this, you see the building when it's done, and it's to know that you are helping to improve a community and to save its most cherished assets is greatly rewarding. It's still just as challenging as it's ever been. I think one of the things that we see now that has really grown is sort of the disparity between how the state reviews projects and how the federal government reviews projects. They're looking at the same rule book, but a lot of rehabilitation is similar to almost like a beauty pageant. It's beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and both the state and federal government can look at a design aspect of a project and come up with two completely opposite reactions to it. And so that challenge has grown some over the years. But all in all, does it stop us from doing this work? No, it's too important. And quite frankly, the market in Roanoke has been great for housing downtown. It's shown no sign of slowing down.
That's great. Well, again, we appreciate everything you're doing for the Roanoke area and Richmond as well. You've obviously done some projects there as well over the years. So, Bill, thanks again for joining us. Do you want to provide your contact information if you're comfortable doing that, if people want to reach out or have questions for you?
Sure. So my website is billchapmaninc.com. That's INC Inc. And my email address is bill@billchapmaninc.com. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if anyone wants to reach out, they're more than welcome to.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Well, that is a wrap for this episode of the Real Estate Tax Playbook. I appreciate everyone tuning in. Please make sure, as always, to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube. Please make sure to check us out, comment, like. If there's more content you want to hear about, please reach out and let me know. I will add, this would be a good episode to combine with Pat Murtaugh's episode. who is more on the technical side with Brian Edwards with historic tax credit and rehabilitation. So these would be two good episodes to combine together and listen to if you are interested in this work. So again, I appreciate everyone being here. We got a lot of good content coming for season 2. Everyone take care. We'll be back soon.